May I ask you, how long do we talk for? Just so as I'll know.
We have to finish before 2 o'clock.
So we talk for about 40 or 50.
Yeah, we can talk for as long as we want.
Well, I wasn't sure whether it was 5 or 6 minutes or longer.
No, well, see, I take the tape and I edit it into a daily feature.
Yeah.
So I do it every day. So yesterday I interviewed Reynolds Price.
I met Reynolds the other night.
Did you just meet him?
Yes.
And I always go to the Algonquin Hotel, room 705.
Is that where he stays?
That's where he always stays. So every time he's in town,
he sent me his book. It came this morning, actually, but I was running in and out. Is it good?
His new one? Yes.
Yeah, Blue Calhoun.
It's called Blue Calhoun.
Calhoun, yeah.
And the thing that makes it stand out, in my opinion, is the language. As you have a very distinctive linguistic style in your work, so does he. And he speaks and writes as a Southerner, of course, with all of the...
I know his earlier books. It's just I hadn't read this one, but I will.
Well, this book is in the form of a letter.
Yeah.
To Blue Calhoun's granddaughter, so it has to be the longest letter ever written, probably.
He's very brave, in the wheelchair and everything. He really is.
Yeah.
We went out after we did a television, the Charlie Rose, and we went out afterwards. And, we got up that street, and I said, I won't be able to get you up these steps. I hope so.
Well, we chatted for about 45 minutes in his hotel room yesterday, and then he mentioned that he was going off for the first time in his literary career
on a tour,
on a national tour.
Yeah, that's right.
He's going back down to North Carolina for the next 10 days to rest up for it.
Yeah.
But then he says the worst thing is just the logistics, getting in and out of cabs, holding up the wheelchair, this sort of thing. But
airplanes.
But he's looking forward to it.
I'm not. Don't tell anyone that.
Well, he's never done it before. This is something new for him. Well, we're here to talk about... I just mentioned him because I just said we talked for about 45 minutes.
Sure.
Somehow we digressed. But Time and Tide, you redevelop and extend some themes that were in the Country Girls trilogy to a degree. Kate, for example, also had an unhappy marriage. She left her husband, was looking for a place to stay. But in Time and Tide, of course, you take this same essential situation and extend it much further.
I think what it is principally is the Country Girls and the trilogy was written from the point of view of girls seeing the world through the eyes of authority, through the eyes of parents, through the eyes of the church, and in short, authority. Time and Tide is the world, is the parent, the mother, seeing the world often through her children, as you know, so that it is, I think, very different. You say, it's the same, somebody's looking for a place to live, or they fall in love, or but that's all the time. That happens all the time. I think one is a young person's book, and the other is older person's, in that sense of looking at life. I mean, the mother, Nell, in Time and Tide, in a way, her own youth it's her children's youth. It's all those young people that she sees and dressed up in fancy dress and funny hats in South Kensington, having drugs, but, and her son calling her by another name, not addressing her. That's only one example. But she sees the world through children very much, and her parenthood, it mustn't be just said that it's motherhood. Parenthood is a big number. It's a bigger number than anyone realizes until they are a parent. The hook and the love and the actual visceral attachment, I think, is stronger than any other bond, stronger than love in marriage or friendship, because they come out of your body, out of your bloodstream.
Is that bond shared by the children, do you believe, in the same way?
In Time and Tide, or in life?
In life, in general. In Time and Tide, it's it's iffy. But I think the children did have an enormous bond with their mother.
Yes. I think it's shared, but usually, to answer your question, usually in retrospect. I think most of us feel a forgiveness, if you like, or anyhow, new emotions, shall we say, about our own parents, often after they're dead, or we've gone away from them. It isn't shared simultaneously. It happens usually when young people are growing up naturally, they want to get out of the house. They want to, escape their parents and so on. It's only when they have children themselves that they recognize some of the things their parents went through.
Yeah, you're right. They do want to go off and become independent. But often the parents want their children to do that too, even though the emotional.
Oh, it's essential. It's essential. But just talking about the mutuality of affection, it isn't often evident at the time. It comes later, and it often comes sideways. You don't know exactly what your children feel about you until one of their friends tell you or something.
I guess we all have to, at some point, try to reconcile our lives with those of our parents. I think Nell tries to do that in time and tide, but not too successfully. And in your case, did you ever reach a point where you say, I've now reconciled my relationship with my mother and father?
No, I didn't. Bad luck, you might say, but again, timing. First of all, where I grew up and in Ireland, it was, and still is to a great extent, as recent history has proven, it was a very narrow and religious and claustrophobic society. It was also very punitive. Most things one might do were wrong. I had that instilled in me and still actually feel it. My father, they'd been in America, my parents, and they'd gone back to Ireland. And in a way, my mother always yearned for America. Not in a way, in fact. I saw America, particularly New York, as being the Mecca of everything that was to do with success, with glamour, with money, and with happiness. My father had a large farm, but he wasn't, to put it mildly, cut out to be a farmer. He would have made a great actor. He loved telling stories and had this long, thin body, looks like a bit like Samuel Beckett, that kind of ash plant look. He was a drinker and very prone to the horses and so on, so that money ran out, and one must never underestimate the cloud that happens when there's no money in a house. So there was that unhappiness. There was also, they weren't themselves very happy, and unhappy people breed unhappy people. And my mother was very hard on me in particular. I was the youngest child. Everything was redolent of sin, so that I grew up full of fear, both from the church and from her. And I ran away, or eloped, as it used to be called in Victorian novels.
How old were you then?
I was 18 or 19 or something, 18 and a half.
And you came from a small town, a small village, right?
Yes, but
there must have been a scandal.
Well, the biggest scandal was actually my books. Oh, yeah, the elopement was a terrible scandal, but the whole country didn't know about it, only the village. But when The Country Girls was published, I was safely, and if you like, perhaps wobblingly, living in England. I wrote it my first 3 weeks in England. I was so lonely for Ireland and for nature and for companionship and for all the things that I didn't want when I was there. I missed when I had left. Anyhow, it was published, and just before it was published, the nun from my convent wrote and said, "We hear you have written a book. We are very worried, but we give credence, an open mind." That meant they didn't. So the book came out to savage attacks in the Irish papers about this smear on Irish womanhood and how I had disgraced my country and so on. And in my own little village, 3 copies of the book, I suppose a great number considering no one buys books, 3 copies infiltrated the village. The parish priest rounded them up, plus their owners, and plus some other people. And they burned these 3 copies in the garden or grounds of the church. And my mother reported to me 2 vital factors: that several of the women fainted, and that the opinion was that I should be kicked naked through the town. I mean, I love the word naked when the whole of chastity is at stake. So, in that sense, I was made to feel very ashamed of what I had written. And didn't stop me from starting to write the next book. And there is one joke attached to it, because they said the next book was called The Lonely Girl, which was filmed as Girl with Green Eyes. And the consensus was that The Country Girls was a prayer book compared with The Lonely Girl, so you can't win. And I did mind it very much. I was very hurt by it, and also probably very angry, but anger comes later. But if you want to be a writer, anyone who does, nothing really deters you. I often think, oh, it would have been nice to have had a little praise, a little support, a little pride, shall we say. But I didn't. I had the opposite. And to go back long to your question of 5 minutes ago or so, I was very afraid of them then. And I was also guilty that secretly I thought I had done wrong, I think if they were alive now, because I'm older, but I'm also a tiny little bit braver, and I've had the benefit of a lot of reading, psychoanalysis, or some analysis, whether it's called psychiatry or psychoanalysis, and I would be able to reach them by being, in a kind of way, their parent. Because it's what you learn in this life, both intuitively and every other way, a knowledge of different kinds that makes you grow up. And I suppose I could have talked to them now, certainly to my mother. Although my father, to give him his due, he was a very violent man, but he never mentioned my books, except once he was selling cattle in a field. A man came, a jobber, to buy some cattle. And at the end of the transaction, the man said to my father, "Did your daughter write a book called August is a Wicked Month?" My father said, "Yeah." And the man said, "I bet you had a page out of that," meaning, a few quid, some money. And my father said, "No, I had 2. So he used to tell me that story with some pride. But my mother was much crosser. She always thought that literature was sinful, and I've said somewhere in some thing I wrote that it was as if in a previous incarnation she had read Molly Bloom's soliloquy and somehow knew that she hated my being a writer. I began to, as a pharmacist. They wanted me to do that. But she never forgave me for writing, and never, apart from saying I should be kicked naked or putting the book I gave her, The Country Girls, in a bolster case, hidden away, and all the offending words inked out. I found it after her death. She never remarked on my being a writer. I might as well have been any other job. So it was an area, and it's a big area if it happens to be what you do, that we could never talk about. But she didn't read, you say.
You must have cut very close to their emotional core with those books.
I suppose I did, but you see, I think, and this is not said boastfully, I think my books, they are full of a kind of love for them and the place, and real, emotion, whereas they saw them as something that ridiculed or disgraced them. So you're right that it did cut to the core, but You know, if they had read, again, it's all to do with education. If they had read Chekhov, let us say, or Flaubert, or Maupassant, or Faulkner, or Hemingway, or anyone, that would have been okay. But there were no books where I grew up in the village. There was no library. And there was one copy of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca penetrated the village. Some woman, lovelorn, no doubt, bought it, and was loaned by the page to avid female readers. Unfortunately, I was too young to be loaned a page, but I don't know about this. It wasn't loaned consecutively, so you might get page 64, and then page 2, and people were saying, what happened with Max de Wint, and so on. But that was because it was a story about jealousy, and, and all that. And there's nothing, to put it mildly, I think, offensive in Rebecca. It's a very good book, but my books touched them because, in some ways, they reflected their own lives. If I had written a book maybe set in another century, or indeed set in another country, or with a certain, if you like, a distance, it probably wouldn't have offended as much, but I couldn't. You can only write what you sort of know.
You have such an unusual, unlikely background for someone who became such a creative and intellectual success. How did you break out of that mold that you were born into?
Well, I always loved writing. That actual assemblage of words, like, let's say, a line of Keats when he saw Fanny Brawne on Vauxhall Bridge, snared by the ungloving of thine hand. I mean, that comes to my mind, or any Shakespeare line. So I loved words, and I love narrative. And Ireland is a very good place for narrative. Everyone you meet tells you a story.
And of course, you had your father as
my father was a great storyteller. But also, it's a question of because of having had a hard upbringing, to put it mildly, I've always been rather hard on myself, and I feel that I must constantly be learning. And it sounds so priggish, but I hope I'm not. Don't mean to be. So that I knew I wanted to leave that village, and I knew I wanted to write. But it wasn't just the simple ambition of getting from A to C, let's say, of publishing one book or two books, or being on television or any of those things. I had a little yearning for those things, but it wasn't the deepest need. It was of wanting, and I still am trying, to write things that just glistened with truth and with depth. And because of wanting that, it is never, so to speak, realized, because each book I write is like the rung of a ladder to the next book. I don't feel satisfied with, although I work very hard and rewrite and want prose to be like music. I want the prose to be perfect and the story to be powerful, and the two to a marriage of that, the two to complement each other. But when it's done, then, I am already, as now, for instance, agitated and awake at night about the next book. I had a dream last night in the hotel here in New York. It was a rather wonderful dream, but complicated. May I tell it to you?
Please.
I, as a child, loved clothes, still do. All women, I'm afraid, love clothes. You probably know that. And out of a kind of rag bag of clothes, I found, and it was going to be mine, a sort of dress that was also an apron, and I think it was black and white. And I thought, now I can write. I have this garment. It was like talismanic. And then there was a problem, because the book I was writing had two sides to it. two narrators. So I had 4 pages written, and 2 of them were about one thing and 2 were about the other. And I thought, I have got to merge those 4 pages and those 2 minds together. And I looked for a crystal, an actual crystal that I have in real life. And it was a sort of swollen rose quartz. And I thought, if I can get this crystal and put it on these pages, then the next book will be all right. And then I wakened up. But I felt it was about writing. I mean, dreams are complicated, but they're also messages to us.
You mentioned that as you wrote, one book becomes a ladder to the next. And I did notice that the original, your first novel, beautiful language, but told with a certain degree of simplicity, but Time and Tide, of course, is much more complex in literary terms. So obviously, you do learn. One does learn.
Or one has to learn. I think we learn more from reading. Vladimir Nabokov said, to read 6 good books in one's whole life is a really rich thing. I think I learned a lot from reading. When I wrote The Country Girls, and I was reading, I was more interested then in the simple confessional approach, like I wakened quickly and sat up in bed abruptly. It's only when I am anxious that I waken easily, and for a minute I could not remember what it was that worried me. Then I remembered the old reason he had not come home, my father. So it's written throughout in that style, which is very direct. Some of my critics, of which one has many, excuse me, blame one then for becoming more complex, but I don't hold with that blame. I think they're wrong. You have to. For instance, one of the things that happened to Ernest Hemingway, whom I greatly admire, was he didn't develop. His later books seemed like parodies of himself, and that's tragic. And that's tragic for him. Otherwise he wouldn't have taken a pistol to himself. I think you have to learn both from what you have written yourself and from others. And when I sat down to write Time and Tide, it took me a long time. The Country Girls took me 3 weeks. Time and Tide took me 3 years. That's the difference. I don't like dense prose that's plotted. I like prose to be very lucid, but it gets more complex. The thinking gets more complex. The sentences still have to be, you know, they can't be too, well, cluttered is the right word. But when I sat down to write it, and the first words that came to me, I knew roughly that it was going to be a kind of voyage of a woman. I can't write about men, alas, or not very well. I can't make them central characters. The voyage of a woman who had once been a daughter, as all women are, who then became a very young and frightened wife in the manner of a Victorian novel. She mentions Jane Eyre, and Mr. Rochester, the character Nell does, who has small children whom she adores and almost loses, then does not lose, but in another sense through life and through life's the cards that life deals, loses them. And along coinciding with all those facts, daughter, wife, mother, is this burning creature who wants to experience life and, forgive the word, adventure and romance, and she takes LSD, so that all the time the two, like the 2 pages, the 4 pages last night, the 2 strains are running through her life. The dutiful person, the frightened person, and the rebellious person. And that was harder to do than just Because in the Country Girls, I have two characters, Kate and Baba. So Kate is the poet, if you like, and Baba is the rebel. In Time and Tide, those two characters are, in a sense, merged into one. I didn't, by the way, when I sat down, think any of that. I just thought, this is the journey that has to be made. Many books that women write about women tend to be, domestic stories. And there's nothing wrong with that, except it's not enough. Because a woman isn't simply a domestic creature. She's many creatures, there's more to it than that. And I had the first lines, "Do you believe her?" She asked, 4 words, 4 treacheries. One said, "They cannot be unsaid. You cannot wash them and wipe them," the way she was wiping dishes. And I start books like that. I start with my first 3 or 4 lines. And I vaguely know the nature of the journey. But that's all. Were I to know it, I read now that people send in synopsises of books to publishers and it's discussed with an editor and all that. I'd be hopeless at that. I wouldn't be able to do it, because to me the journey you make is what the excitement and métier and material of the book is.
It's a voyage of discovery for the author as well as the
Very
characters.
much.
Yeah. It's obvious that you're a poet as well. I can tell that by the language that you use.
Well, I think all prose should be poetry. It's not a fashionable view, by the way, but I do think that the tightness and succinctness and, if you like, slight mysteriousness, not muffledom, but mysteriousness of poetry, is essential to prose. I find a lot of prose, particularly modern prose, I can't read it because it doesn't nourish me. It isn't enough for me to read a story about a man or a woman getting on a train, losing their memory, going to another country, getting another identity, a good galloping story. That's fine. But the language must match it. And that's the language of poetry. I'm always annoyed when I meet poets who refer rather scathingly to the notion of prose. But then they probably don't read good prose. They don't read prose at all, maybe.
Well, Time and Tide could be a poem. And in fact, it is a poem.
Ah, thank you.
But the fact of the matter is, many novelists are not poets, and you can tell that in
First
your
paragraph.
language.
Yeah.
They write in a matter-of-fact way that you mentioned a galloping good story. It could be, but that's all it is.
Faulkner was a poet. I'm rereading a lot of Faulkner. He was a poet. He was a great poet, prose writer.
Now, in Time and Tide, none of the men is particularly sympathetic. As I kept turning the pages, I kept looking for a man who might be a hero, but there aren't any.
Well, her sons are heroes.
In a way, I guess, yeah.
I think so. It's funny, certainly her husband is not a hero, but some reviewers have also remarked what you have said. I think the poet in the book, or the sort of cowboy poet that she was in love with, his name is Duncan, if you remember, I think he's a sympathetic character, but just lost.
Irresponsible.
Yeah, but, a lot of people are. Sorry.
I suppose one could be sympathetic and still be irresponsible. Sure.
I think so.
But he's certainly not a hero.
No, but she's not a heroine either, only insofar as she occupies a lot of the book. She's a wayward, vacillating, confused person. Heroes are hard to find now.
Would you contemplate having a man as a hero in an upcoming book?
A man is what?
As a hero. As an eminently sympathetic character in a future book.
The book I'm writing now, House of Splendid Isolation, or that I hope to be writing, is a woman, a husband, a terrorist. A hero isn't quite the word. You see,
Would it be
heroism
difficult?
is a very it's a great word and it's a great ideal, but when we think of books that we've loved that have stood the test of time, like Anna Karenina, let's say, Vronsky isn't a hero, neither is Karenina. In War and Peace, Pierre is a sort of hero just by being there so much. But your sterling hero, Candide, I suppose Voltaire's Candide, that is a hero, but it's a hero, it's adventure. See, in the 20th century, when there has been so much dialectic, a hero would be, or a heroine, for that matter, either simply, in quote, a hero or a heroine, would be a fairly boring character, because it would be all just one side. It would be doing valorous or noble acts, like Charles Dickens, for instance.
Let me rephrase the question. Let's not talk about heroes. How difficult is it for you as a woman, and you write about women very well, and very sympathetically, there's no question about that, but how difficult is it for you as a woman writer to be able to do that for a man, or develop a man's point of view? Very
difficult for me. In fact, maybe impossible. It's a limitation, and I regret it. But I don't think I could, and it's not that I don't like men, because I do, actually. I really do. I don't think I can get excuse me, inside the skin of a man the way sometimes I can get inside the skin of a woman. It's a different way of thinking and being. It's a different quotidian of emotion. And I would, along with not being able to, I would also fear I'm not able to. So I wouldn't have a sure touch. And sureness of touch is what counts in a work. The reader can feel it then. You can feel, I let this author take me anywhere, because there's a sure touch. I wouldn't have that in making a man center stage. The men are always there, but the journey is the woman's journey. I mean now the internal journey, apart from the narrative journey. And I regret it. And in my next incarnation, maybe I have to be a man for one time round to then, on the next incarnation, write the book after that.
It didn't scare P.D. James, her hero, Adam Dalgleish, is certainly a man, although named after James' school teacher, but a woman's school, Maisie Dalgleish. But she just wanted a male as her hero, and
and she got him.
And she got him.
She got him.
But of course, and Dalgleish is an introspective person. He's a poet.
Yes.
And Phyllis James writes extremely well.
She does.
Not like you, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different genre, but nevertheless, I think men can write.
Men can. Madame Bovary is the greatest example, and Anna Karenina. Scott Fitzgerald wrote wonderfully about women.
I'm not absolutely certain the sexes are that much different.
Well, they do. If you think of, say, the books of Philip Roth and John Updike, just to take two examples, especially Philip Roth's, it's the men you remember. It's Portnoy and Zuckerman. It's the men, the women are in the wings, the men are center stage. And I think it's true for, it is true a lot, actually. It is. It's not, I don't say that as a criticism, just as a fact.
Well, let's go back to the education of a writer. When you started working on The Country Girls, had you written anything before that time, or you published it all? How did you learn to develop yourself as a writer? All of a sudden, spring into the world of Country Girls.
I'd written little things for newspapers, and I used to send them, and like every writer, it's the old cliche, but it's true, I had nothing but rejection slips. I would write little essay on, going to the seaside, or really kind of mawkish. And I came to London, and I was asked to write the book, because I used to read for publishers. I used to read manuscripts for a guinea. And a man there asked me if I would like to write a book. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And Blanche Knopf, who was of the House of Knopf, she was the wife of Alfred Knopf, came to England and met me, I remember, in the Savoy, or no, in Claridge's, and was impressed enough to commission this book. The two publishers, they paid me £50, which was $100, to write The Country Girls. I spent the money immediately. That was now I had to write the book because I had spent the money. And it was it was like, to me, a revelation. Up to then, my prose was a little flowery. I went in a lot for the adjectives, and everything was a bit lush. And I read in the paper, the New Statesman, I think, that Arthur Meitzner was giving a lecture at the university, London University, on American literature, on Hemingway and Scott Fitzgerald. They were the two. And I went there, and he took out, started his lecture with reading the first passage of A Farewell to Arms. And it was like a bolt of lightning or thunder of both in my brain. Because here was the most flawless, simple, and yet profound prose. Here was poetry, in fact. And it was the opening paragraph, which, alas, I can't memorize. I wish I could. I used to be able. And I thought, this is what writing is. It doesn't have to be flowery and abundant. It just has to be pared away so that you get to the truth of it. And coinciding with that was like, truly this happened. It was such a... I bought a second-hand book for 4p called Introducing James Joyce by T.S. Eliot. And I opened it at a chapter from Portrait of the Artist. And the chapter was a Christmas dinner in the house of the Dedalus family. And, everything, the table was described, and the cloth, and the fire, and then the plum pudding being brought in, and the little wobble of flame on the top of the plum pudding that was lit. And the row, of course, usual to any Irish situation. Sex and politics is, you mention either of those words and there's combustion in any Irish table. And I thought, oh my God, one doesn't have to write about faraway things or gypsies. I was always very interested in elopement and Victorian kind of romance. I thought one has to write about the world one knows, but somehow render it in some strange way both magic and archetypal. It can't be just, it might seem just the little story of the Christmas dinner in Portrait of an Artist, but it isn't. It has some breath of otherness in it. And those were the two things that started me off.
How old were you when you had that literary awareness?
When I was in my 20s, 24.
That's extraordinary, because most people can live their entire lives and not be aware of those things, or can be told those things and still not understand them.
Well, sometimes I believe in God. I don't believe...
Which times?
Times like that. It was as if these messages or signposts or signals were given to me. And I am forever thankful, because they were what started me. And I sat down and wrote The Country Girls, and in a burst of... I never ceased crying while I was writing it. And it's a quite blithe book. It's a happy-ish book, I think. At least it has some jokes. With the whole world of the emotion, and the whole landscape of Ireland, the frost, the this, the that, were like, I had not known, this is slightly interesting, or at least was to me, I had not known how thoroughly I had absorbed my landscape. And in the case of this book, of Time and Tide, although some of the landscape is Irish, there's one long flashback or journey back to Ireland for, of course, a funeral. I had not written about London. I hadn't really set a book in London, except Girls in Their Married Bliss, but so much of it was dialogue and was still the two girls from the Country Girls. And I've been living in London for 25 years, and I never dared to write about it because I wasn't sure that I knew it well enough. And now I think I do, so it's time to leave it and to come to New York.
Did I read correctly that your early books are actually banned in Ireland?
Oh, yes.
How could they do that? Of course, there is no First Amendment in Ireland, I guess.
Lunacy. The way of banning books in Ireland was, to put it mildly, chaotic. Any three readers, you, me, and Ida from the other room, would send. I don't even think you had to send the whole book. I think you need only send the page and say there was the word Christ, or we won't use any worse words. Then the book was banned by the censorship board. There were 7 or 8 devout Catholics waiting every morning for this little crop of foul literature. So they were then banned automatically. I mean, it appeared in the paper. It was a very arcane and bigoted system, and tells a lot about the country.
Is it still in effect?
No, everything goes in now. As a matter of fact, the only bad thing about it now is there's no interest in literature, because in those days they sort of banned what they thought might be a literary book. Now it's a free-for-all, so literature is on the bottom shelf. No, it's not in effect now, but they, television and all that has become the new god.
Do you go back to Ireland with any regularity?
I do. I go back a lot.
What's it like for you? How are you received?
Well, it's much nicer now. I'm received, believe it or not, very well, and do programs like this with you, or programs where people phone in. And my books created a little bit of a stir in the fact that there hadn't been a woman writer, and many people identified with what I wrote, many women especially, and they were banned, so people had to go up to the north to get them, or go to England and all that. There was furore. And people tell me now, or if I do one of these radio programs where people phone in, they say, your book, I read your book in secret, and I had to cover the cover with brown paper, but it meant this or that to me. And they're very, very nice to me now. They're very uncritical. They gave me a bit of an award last year. It was given to me by the then Prime Minister, Charlie Haughey. And the prize before me, there was 12 in all. So I was being given the ultimate prize. The person before me was Alan Parker, who had directed the film The Commitments. So everyone had to go up, and make a little speech and kind of be thrilling. So Alan Parker, very cleverly, had assembled the group from The Commitments. So they all went up on stage and started singing, and you could hear the songs of The Commitments through the hall. And then I had to go up. And I found extraordinary, I was surprised, especially coming after that, an extraordinary warmth from a lot of people I don't know and have never met and will never meet. It's as if they were glad that some little hairline of justice was done.
Have they ever said, Edna, come back, live with us now, all is forgiven?
They do. Irish people are very touchy about people their own going abroad, because it's connected with poverty when people left to go to America and England and so on, but it's connected with patriotism, if you like, and they would love if I went back to live there. I'm sure I would get a newspaper headline, except that it's not for me. Once you live in a large city, and I think this is true of a lot of people, it is very hard to go back then to a smaller city or a parish or a townland. It just is. I don't know why. I love living in cities. I love nature and to go to the country. But I also feel that in Ireland, it being such a small country, and definitely a very inquisitive country, we're not left alone much, that I wouldn't have that particular hermetic freedom that I need to write. I lead a very hidden life and secluded life in London.
So there's a certain degree of anonymity in a place like London.
Oh, totally. You didn't see anyone for a month.
And that's your favorite city?
No, New York is my favorite
really?
city. I love New York.
Well, you're certainly in the minority these days.
Well, I know, but it's funny, the number of people I meet, both in Ireland and in England, who love being in New York. Now, admittedly, I'm a visitor, staying in the Wyndham Hotel, having a lovely time, having interviews. People are nice to me. I don't have to cook or carry bags of groceries home, etc. Even if I did have to carry the groceries home, I'll tell you what I like about it. I like the clash of races and culture. There's more energy, there's more debate. I have 10 times more lively conversation